In an incident that reverberated through Juakali Estate in Eldoret this week, a KDF officer turned his gun on his relatives before killing himself.
Those close to him say Haron Tioni suffered severe anger and panic attacks, scars he carried home from the front lines in Somalia and South Sudan. Sadly, he is not alone.
Many soldiers still live in the line of fire days after leaving the battlefield, battling mental health issues such as post-traumatic stress disorders. NTV's Anita Nkonge delves into the subject and reports on the battle after the war.
They are our first line of defense, protecting the country from foreign threats. For these soldiers, they are always on the front lines, but even when they return, some still live in the front line, fighting the battles ravaging their minds.
When they come back, they are not the same soldiers that went to war.
Go slowly and scan southwest.
A Kenya Defence Force soldier who killed himself after killing his lover and two relatives in Juakali, that's in Eldoret, has been described as problematic or a problematic person by the neighbors who knew him.
A drinking spree that should have ideally ended in a good night's sleep instead ended with 3 people dead and a village in shock. Haron Tioni, a KDF officer attached to Lanet Barracks, arrived at his aunt's home disgruntled after a night of drinking and insisted that his aunt Rose Sang wakes up and helps him resolve a spat with his lover Dorcas Lorinyoya. In the heat of the argument, Haron turned his gun on his lover and his aunt. He later drove to his uncle's house and shot him too before killing himself. Haron served in Sudan and Somalia on several peacekeeping missions, but he was constantly living in the line of fire. His peers and family members say he often suffered panic attacks, was constantly irritable, and easily got into fights. Sadly, he is not alone.
It's an unfortunate case. People are not able to manage their own stress.
Where is recognition for all the strong people who fought for peace? Can we save the lives of all the strong people who fought for peace?
Every word of this song seems to pierce Lucy Mukeria like a bullet. She wrote this song in honor of her brothers and sisters in arms, some still alive, some long dead. She is now retired from the Kenya Defence Forces, where she served for 10 years as a psychologist and rose to the rank of major. Today, a psychologist is the last title she would use to describe herself.
I like to think of myself as a rabbit farmer, living my best life, and a creator and inventor, and up until recently a musician.
Lucy turns to music to help her heal from the scars of war, but her song isn't just drawn from her own experiences on the war front.
The song is called Where is the Recognition? And Where is the Recognition basically is about mental health, specifically to do with psychological war wounds that impact on soldiers.
According to psychologists, one suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder if exposed to one or more events that have involved or threatened death, threatened serious injury, and or threatened sexual violation.
Is to humanize the experience.
Even though she was a counselor to Army veterans, Lucy had to wake up to the reality that she too had been affected by experiences in the front line when the symptoms began to unravel.
I went to actually a point I started getting panic attacks, you know, and that signaled a lot for me, that inability to go to the wards, the inability to, you know, see dead bodies once again. It never used to be a problem to me, but I had to wake up to the reality of where I was, as to why my heart was racing, why my palms were getting sweaty, why my thoughts were racing, why I wasn't sleeping at night, why I was beginning to feel hopeless. I just wanted silence.
Lucy is just one of many who came back home with the psychological scars of war. Ex-Special Forces officer Byron Odera says that even though he is home now, he has never been the same.
As you can imagine, transforming an individual into a military practitioner takes quite a bit of a change in so many ways. You know, there's a character change, there's a culture change, the whole perspective change, and then of course you go through very traumatic experiences, so that changes the whole you know, you in profound ways. People who suffered trauma of different categories, like myself, didn't ever get to sit before someone to be helped. So some of us struggled through this alone and possibly just picked ourselves up, and through learning and a lot of mental strength, you know, picked ourselves up and forged ahead.
Byron says that nothing prepares you for life after service.
We've had men who've killed themselves, there are men who've set themselves on fire. I have a personal friend who did, and you know, sustained over 90% burns his 4 days in an ICU. He died.
Susan Gitau is a volunteer counselor for the Army veterans. She explains the toll it takes on families.
Families say, Daddy, if it's the children, went to war, he's come back a different man. If it's a woman, she says, my husband is not the same anymore. They look like the foot soldiers. Or definitely they are the foot soldiers. You're not at the war zone, but you've basically gone with your significant other there.
In the United States of America, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs dedicates a section of their website to reach out to and help veteran soldiers suffering from PTSD. Here in Kenya, the government has come under fire for not doing enough to prepare veterans for civilian life.
Nobody knows, nobody cares. If you hear anything outside of that, it's a lie. Even I don't blame the military. I don't. I literally don't blame them. I'll tell you why. There is nothing that mandates them to take care of military veterans. So they are not breaking any law. They might be breaking a moral law, but they're not breaking a legal law. And so that's why having a veterans law in this country will save us all. Will save so many marriages, will save so many families, will save so many children.
I'm not saying they're doing nothing, but I'm saying there's a lot more that needs to be done. In our case, we may have gone into war, and because we didn't have that proper understanding of how this would play out, then we didn't even have structures in place to address that downside of people who'd come out of the same impacted mentally.
The underlying message, it would seem, is that there are not enough functional and practical structures in place to help veterans when they get home from war. So I went to the Department of Defense to find out what it is exactly they do to support their soldiers when they return home.
Kenya Defense Forces has a medical scheme, a Defense Forces Medical Insurance Scheme called DEFMIS, which now the people who retire, their medical issues are taken over by that organization, which now one is entitled for medical care for life.
And there is more.
Support of the soldier is not only the soldier himself. We need even to support the families. And KDF has come up with what we call welfare centers. In every battalion, there's a welfare center, which is manned by counselors, social workers, and other specialists to be able to take care of the soldier, welfare of the soldier, and welfare of the families.
It is not just veterans who are provided with support. According to Chief Nanga, soldiers in active duty are now also assisted to mind their mines.
As we deploy our soldiers in operations and other areas, we know there's a likelihood some of them will present with post-traumatic stress disorder. So we start with prevention. Prevention, awareness, and deploying people, medical people, who are trained to recognize any changes in behavior in the military. And these people, the medical people, are embedded in the troops.
Soldiers are human beings and who have feelings and who have the same struggles as everybody else. And then beyond that, they're the people who've given their lives and signed up to the serious business of protecting this country. People who've signed up to the highest, amount that could be written on a check, which is I could pay with my life, deserve a bit more.
I really pray for the day the president of this nation will mention about PTSD. Mention, to hear from him. Do they tell him? Does he know? Or even when they explain it to him, does he understand? Because if this is understood very well, I'm telling you, all of us, all the sectors will do their best.
Mr. President, the soldiers need your support. Please lend them your support.
Anita Nkonge, NTV.